Hey, everybody, this is Tom Barnes and my podcast, The 78, an extension of the Stories from the 78 website. So I appreciate you checking things out. It is mostly all about Chicago or stories coming out of Chicago. And as I travel, I morph around and do other stories. But this particular podcast episode is about some really great stories that happened in the city this week. The first one I got to talk about is one of my favorite stories in Chicago, stores in Chicago, I should say. It is the Alley, celebrating its 48th anniversary. Now, Mark Thomas, who is the owner of the Alley, has been an outspoken person in like city politics, sticking up for the little guy, right? And Mark has a fun story about how he started the Alley. Basically, he was on his way to, or his parents were married, right? And then his parents get divorced. And he was supposed to go to Harvard. So this guy's no dummy, right? He's going to go to Harvard, but he takes his savings bonds that he was going to go to Harvard with. And he basically says, screw that. I'm not doing that. I don't want to do this. I bought this jewelry business, and he sunk his money into that, and he started making jewelry. And the Alley was actually like a franchise kind of a business back in the day in malls throughout the area. And one of them was in Schaumburg. And he was selling his jewelry to the Alley, and the guy who owned the Alley didn't want to pay. Like, he kept saying, I'll get it to you next week. I'll get it to you next week. Well, Mark, being the Chicago guy that he is, went to the Alley in Schaumburg and basically bullied his way into the office of the guy who wasn't paying him. Kind of got a little rowdy in there, not with him per se, but got a little rowdy with the desk, maybe a little intimidation. And the guy was like, okay, I'll give you your money. But I want these stores to succeed, and I need your help. You have a successful business. I want you to help me figure out how to make this successful. So Mark says, fine, but you got to pay me my money first, yada, yada. So he gives him like controlling shares or stake in the business, right? And eventually, Mark turns the Alley around, and the guy still doesn't want to pay him. So he just gives Mark, or he buys him out. However, not 100% sure. Mark can tell you the story, and it's on the website at storiesfromthe78.com. The Alley now in Avondale, but he kind of took the business and made it his own, and it made it what it is today. And he had a couple spots, but I mean, for a long time, and for my generation, you had the Alley on Clark Street, right by Strange Cargo, another great place. Both not there anymore, but both still around, which is great. Andersonville has home of the Strange Cargo, and the Alley is in Avondale, which has now become like one of the coolest neighborhoods in Chicago. So, and there's great stories that come out of the Alley. It was a place for like inclusion, for punk, for queer, for gay, for everything. They didn't care. They were punk, and they basically sticking it to the man for all these years. And they were inclusive. They were art. It's an artist colony as well over there on Fletcher Street in Avondale. And they sold things that you couldn't find anywhere else. Mark would travel around the world, and I'm not kidding, millions of miles around the world. And he would find things, and he'd bring it to the Alley. He'd buy bulk of it, and then he'd come to the Alley and then sell it. And it became like this mecca for the weird, the strange, the outer fringes of people that I think are totally fine and normal. But, you know, society being what society is, people are like, oh, yeah, whatever, the freaks go there now. And now they've embraced that. They're like, yeah, we're the freaks, we're the misfits, we're the weirdos, and we don't care. So piss off, you know? And so the Alley, and you know what, it's worked 48 years in the Alley for the first time in their history through a block party, which is amazing. They had the hearse funeral club out there, and which means there was like tons of hearses out there, and people from all over that came back. You know, Mark talks about people coming to the Alley from like Alaska for the day. They'll come in and hang out. People whose kids used to come there now come there and come back. You know, people who grew up in the 60s or in the 70s and 80s are now bringing their kids back there because that changed their life. So it's a place where you can just be who you are. You can find something you want. You can find shirts that say fuck off, you know, kind of whatever you want. That's what they have there at the Alley. And it's always been that way. And now there's an artist colony there. There's recording studios there. It's a really great place. It's a really great creative space. And one of the cool stories I'll tell you about the Alley quickly, Rob Zombie, you know, White Zombie back in the day, Rob would come to Chicago all the time. He'd play, you know, at places like the Empty Bottle, the Metro, the Vic, you know, and the Alley was in that enclave back then. The Alley was everywhere. And Rob Zombie came to the store one time. He saw these jackets. There's leather jackets with, you know, a skeleton on them. And Rob was like, what is this? I'm buying it. And he used it in one of his music videos. And then it turned the Alley on its side because people came in droves because somewhere somebody knew that jacket came from the alley. And like Rob Zombie, I mean, White Zombie was just this band that was out of this world back in the day, kind of this band that was just on an island all to itself. So Rob, told people came to the alley to buy it. And Mark said he sold millions of dollars worth of those jackets. So it's kind of cool. So if you go to the story, you'll see the exact jackets I'm talking about. And you get a little tour of the alley and the artist colony that's there. It's an awesome place. And I'm so happy that it is in Chicago, just because it is such a wonderful thing. Another thing that, and they were kind of part of this block party, and they were friends of Mark's, is the Kuma'S Corner. If you've never heard of Kuma'S, I don't know what you're talking about, because Kuma'S started off in Avondale, same neighborhood, right? And now they have one in the West Loop, which is the bougie, it's the food neighborhood. And they have one out in the burbs as well. Kuma'S, along with like the whole Rob Zombie dark vibe, Kuma'S plays like heavy metal in their bars. And all the names of their burgers are after like heavy metal people, sayings, albums, what have you. Like there's a Slayer Pit like fry thing that they have. There's a Metallica inspired burger, but it's a cool place. No frills, man. You walk in there, there's like pictures of like Ozzy and Black Sabbath. They have like Lord of the Rings playing on the TV. The bar is just this neighborhood bar type of vibe, and there's a kitchen in the back, and it's smoky because they're cooking all the food, but the burgers are amazing. And that's why Kuma'S has become famous, not because they played heavy metal in their bar to be kitschy. No, their food is awesome, and they use great quality ingredients. So it tastes really good, and it's served with a side of like punk, or you know what I mean. Like it's just a cool place. So I would highly recommend, anybody that loves like, metal or punk, that's a place you got to take them. And if they like meat on it, and I think they even have a vegan burger probably nowadays, but they've embraced everything. But like the picture that I have on the site is a cheeseburger with a syringe pushed inside of it for the secret sauce. And that's Kuma'S. So if you're looking to, for a very unique burger place, because there's burger joints all over the place, right? And this one is probably one of the most unique burger joints, kind of on the level of like Billy Goat Tavern. If you're looking for old school Chicago, like burger places where they go cheeseburger, that is Billy Goat Tavern. And Kuma'S is like the complete opposite of Billy Goat Tavern in all the right ways. So it's right there on Belmont and Clark, not Clark, I'm sorry, Elston. Belmont and Clark is where the alley used to be, if you dare, if you know what I'm talking about. And now the Kuma'S and the alley are all kind of together on Avondale, along with like the Brood. I did a story about the Brood a couple weeks ago, and Brick Brack Records also in Avondale. So that's why Avondale has become like one of the coolest neighborhoods in the city. I also did a story about this great mural. It's called the I Am a Man mural, and it's a mural dedicated to Martin Luther King. It's also in like Bucktown Wicker Park neighborhood, and you'll see it if you're on the Blue Line. It's this big, beautiful mural of a man holding up a sign that says, I am a man. So if you want to learn more about that, head over to the website. That's in Wicker Park. A couple of other posts, and I'll be out of here, is the Summer Camp Sketch Comedy Music Fest, or not music festival. It's a sketch comedy show. And it's basically like the best of like summer camp, that all into like a sketch comedy show. And it's great. It's I'm gonna just make sure I'm clicking on this to say the exact way that they want to say it, but it's a sketch comedy review is what they're calling it. And it's fantastic. It's at the IO Theater, and it's from my friend Francesca Bucci. That's her name. I was trying to remember her name, but Francesca did this other play. Excuse me. She did this other comedy show that was like a dating comedy show all in one. So, people would go to the theater that was at Second City, and it was like a dating show and a comedy sketch in one. So she kind of morphed on that and did like the best of summer camp, almost like a satire of like summer camp and the whole thing. But it's just a fun way to enjoy new comedy in Chicago. And Francesca is, building that gap between like the comedy that was in Chicago prior to the pandemic, and then the comedy that kind of died during the pandemic because you couldn't go out anywhere. She's rebuilding that. And I think it's great. All these people work really hard to do this comedy. Some of them do it, for the love of comedy, not because they're getting paid. And this sketch review that she's created is just a wonderful thing to check out. And it's at the IO Theater in the Weed Cabaret, which I believe it used to be the Belushi Lounge or something like that. But it's playing now through July 19th. And it's every Friday. So be sure to check it out. It's such a great thing. It's so cool. And they're putting themselves out there. And the picture on the site that they sent me is great. And you'll see what I mean by why it's so great. The Winnetka Music Festival. I didn't know. So it's summer season in Chicago, right? You know, so you got festivals, you got all the stuff going on. I never heard of the Winnetka Music Festival. And I say that because it's such an odd spot to have a music festival when you talk about the music festivals in Chicago. Most of them are in the city or in the city neighborhoods. Like, I mean, when I mean the city, I mean like downtown, you know, like at Grant Park or what have you. And this one's in Winnetka. And Winnetka it's a North Shore suburbs. It's the John Hughes setting in most of his movies, that North Shore vibe, you know? So it's a little bougie. And you don't think music festivals. But I got to be honest with you, this music festival was incredible. It's right there downtown. You can take the train. They close off a couple streets. They had over 25 acts in 2 days. And one of the headliners that I went to that I was really excited to check out was Band of Horses. But they had Milky Chance. They had the Verve Pipe. They had a bunch of other bands up on the rise. But it was started by this woman who created a website called Val's List. And the website, why that's unique and different. So there's people of a certain age who grew up listening to the radio, right? And the radio gave you your new music. It gave you, you know, what was going on in the world, what was popular, why you should care about this music. And she is, you know, of an age where she missed that. Her name is Val. So she writes, you know, Val's List. So it's these compilation Spotify playlists that she makes for people. And that is how she has built this reputation. She's invited bands to come to her house in Winnetka to play in her front yard, and she put on like this performance, and she write about it, and she put them up for the night. It's kind of like the trade-off, you know, because all these bands are looking to save money, right? So she does that, and it becomes like this thing, and somebody says you should start a music festival, and her site takes off, and the whole thing is this wonderful array of bands and artists and this whole thing. And it's shocking to me, it's in its 8th year right now. This 8th year. Big lineup, though, like what I was talking about this year. We had Band of Horses, which is one of the bands that I really want to play. But you have all this food and the beer and the whole thing. Val Heller is her name, and she's the festival founder and also of valslist.com. So very interesting. It was a great music festival. It's Father's Day weekend. And the best part was they stopped it on Sunday. So they didn't want all the dads to miss out, which is also very Winnetka, because usually down in the city that nobody cares. Like they just are like, no, we're gonna make money every day. We can make money, and not this place. So, and it wasn't like overcrowded. It wasn't filled with like a bunch of kids running around like maniacs. And when I say kids, I mean like kids in their 20s. At Lollapalooza, you'll know what I mean, where it's just like people pass out on the lawn because they're first time they've ever had, you know, a gummy or a drink or what have you. This was not that. This was controlled, and I'm just old, so that was fine. I loved it. It was a good time. And I would highly recommend that next year. She's done a great job. And go to valslist.com just because that is something that I think a lot of people would be very surprised in like these music lists that she has. And it's a great way to find music because you don't want to just depend on an algorithm all the time to find music. So anyhow, that is this podcast edition of the 78, the extension of the stories from the 78 website. So thank you for watching, listening, and the whole thing. Please subscribe, tell your friends, tell your teachers, tell your parents about this. I appreciate it very much. And until then, I will talk to you and see you later. Thanks a lot.